Welcome to Public Speaking with Peter George. Do you want to be calm, confident, and credible every time you speak in public? Then stay tuned as Peter and his guests discuss public speaking tips, techniques, and tactics that help you increase your impact, influence, and income. Here's your host, Peter George.
If you're a published author, then you know that at one time or another, you may be asked to speak in public. This could be for a small gathering of fans. It could be for a large conference. My guest in this episode is Stephanie Chandler, and she is going to share with you, as an author, the numerous benefits to speaking and how you can get more opportunities to do so. An experienced speaker and author, Stephanie is the founder and CEO of Authority Publishing, the Nonfiction Authors Association, and the Nonfiction Writers Conference. She has authored several books, including the Nonfiction Publishing Plan, Own Your Niche, and the Nonfiction Book Marketing Plan. It's a pleasure to have with us today, Stephanie Chandler. Hi, Stephanie. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Peter. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Stephanie, when you wrote your first book and were then asked to speak, what was your biggest lesson or surprise for that matter?
Probably that I didn't hate speaking because I really, by nature, I am actually an introvert, and that always surprises people. And if I had to choose between speaking and writing, I will take writing. That's where I'm my most comfortable. But I know a lot of speakers would rather be speaking versus writing. So I knew that it was something I needed to learn to do, and I'm glad I did. I don't seek out speaking the way some people do, but I enjoy it when I do it.
It's great to know you're an introvert. I'm one too, and I've had several shows, including one not too long ago that is based on introverts making great speakers. So I'm glad you're part of the club.
Yeah, I love our club. I think we are good speakers because we probably have a little more sensitivity to feeling the energy in a room and things like that. So there's some certain value in being an introvert.
Looking back, is there anything that you know now that you wish you knew then?
About speaking? Gosh, that's a good question. I think that probably my greatest challenge as a speaker is wanting to over-deliver. That's been one of my greatest lessons, is trying to cram too much information into a short amount of time. And I continue to struggle with that because I want people to leave with so much value. So that's probably been my greatest struggle and lesson.
So far, we have two things in common. I have to hold back from saying, wait, one more thing.
And there's more. Yeah.
And there always is. You could go on forever.
The other thing that I did, Peter, I'm a Silicon Valley refugee. And way back when, 20 plus years ago, I was a software instructor. And it was my favorite real job I ever had. I don't consider what I do now like a real job. I love what I do. But as a software instructor, we were put through speaker training. And I remember the process being so painful. We sat in a classroom for a solid week, having to give impromptu speeches, and then they'd film us and we'd watch it back with a coach. And you find out you're clicking your pen, or you're jingling your change in the pocket, or you're saying or you're swaying back and forth. And so that training has ended up serving me really well since then. And that was 25 years ago, at least.
That's something you can take with you through the rest of your life.
No question. Yeah, very valuable.
All right, here's a two-part question for you.
Okay.
One, why is it that when someone publishes a book, they're often asked to speak? And two, what are the benefits of accepting those invitations?
Oh, great questions. And I found this out myself. When my first book came out, I started getting asked to speak, and I hadn't anticipated it. And I think it's because being an author makes you an instant authority. I mean, author is the root of the word authority. It gives you immediate credibility, and therefore it makes you an obvious choice as a speaker. And then as a speaker, if I had to choose between sitting in a bookstore doing a book signing or going and giving a presentation to a room full of people and then signing my books at the end, I'll take the presentation every single time because you've just captivated an audience that can't wait to take a little bit of that with you when they go. So speakers sell books. I say it over and over again. I have clients who are speakers. They sell books more than most authors, especially those that really don't have any kind of marketing plan. But I would say speaking is one of my absolute favorite ways to sell books.
You hear quite often for professional speakers, the advice given to them is write a book.
Right.
Because you'll get on even more stages.
100%. It's the best calling card you can have.
Now, whether it's a small speaking tour with just a few events, or maybe an extended one with dozens of events, does it make sense for an author to take the initiative and create their own speaking tour?
Absolutely. And I know many authors who have done that really well and successfully. Charmaine Hammond is in the speaker community. She did a phenomenal tour. She wrote a book about her dog, Toby. And she did, I think it was called the Kindness Tour or something like that. She got an RV company to loan her an RV, sponsor an RV. She got a company to wrap the RV with the book, picture of the book. It was like stories about Toby or something like that. And then she reached out to everyone she knew and said, can I come to your town? Can I speak at your office? Can I speak at your retail store? She spoke at pet food stores and she spoke at office buildings and she spoke at bookstores. And I don't know how many engagements she did. It was several dozen speaking engagements. She got the whole tour sponsored, sold a ton of books. It was very, very successful. So yes, Peter, I think you should coordinate your own book tour.
I think that's brilliant. And I'm sure there are a lot of listeners right now saying, how can I get people to sponsor my tour?
Yes.
I just think it's great that she actually did that, she reached out and had the confidence to do so. That's absolutely wonderful. I've never heard of anything like that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, she's not afraid to pick up the phone. And I think a lot of that leveraged relationships. And I have this whole exercise I talk about a lot called the tribe of influence. Like, look at who you know. It could be coworkers from 20 years ago, or somebody you live next door to, or somebody you went to school with. Maybe they now work at some large company that could buy 500 copies of your book or could book you to speak, or they know an influential podcaster that could have you on as a guest. And it's amazing what can happen when you leverage the relationships you already have. Very powerful.
You teach that in your course, don't you?
I do. I do.
Your course is excellent. I took it. It's excellent.
Thank you so much.
I encourage those people who are writing books now, if they're nonfiction, to take your course. It was well worth it.
Thank you. It's the Book Marketing Master Course. You were a part of our inaugural launch. It went really, really well. So we'll be back next year with another round of the course. And we're also doing a book publishing master course starting in January. It's really fun to be able to work with. I love nonfiction authors. Nonfiction authors are teaching, they're helping people live better lives. They're making a difference in the world. It's the reason I chose to specialize in nonfiction. So the courses just help me kind of build on that and help others live their purpose.
You've written several books. Are they all nonfiction?
They are, yes.
And that was the impetus for you to start the organization, right?
Yeah, it really was, because I was that kid who was writing short stories and poems on the playground, right? And then I grew up and I worked in the Silicon Valley for a number of years. And I kept coming back to wanting to write. I didn't know how to make a living as a writer. So I opened a brick and mortar bookstore in Sacramento in 2003. And I thought I was going to sit in the back office and write novels. That was my plan, because when you grow up wanting to be a writer, that's what you think you're supposed to do. And I started writing short stories. They were terrible, Peter. I mean, horrible, horrible stories. And I realized that I was not a fiction writer. I just lacked the imagination, and it was devastating. And then while I'm doing all of this, my Silicon Valley friends are caravanning up to Sacramento going, you quit your job to do this? Tell me how to quit my job, because it's, I'm afraid to leave my job. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to help them. And my first book ended up being a business startup guide. And I built a whole platform on how to start a business. That's how I got started. And then as time went on, I was helping people get their books published. I was speaking at writers' conferences, and I was constantly going, where are the nonfiction sessions, right? These conferences aren't speaking. I was at a conference with 500 people. I was the only business book writer there because there was no content for us. So that's how the Nonfiction Authors Association and Writers Conference were born. Nobody else was helping us.
You've been a great deal of help. And I have a book coming out, hopefully right after the first of the year. I've turned to you and your organization and been very happy that I did. And I suggest to all the listeners who are writing a nonfiction book to join your organization and get the help they could use.
I appreciate that, Peter. Thank you.
Now, a couple of minutes ago, you spoke about book signings. We were talking about touring, and you said if you could either speak and sign books at the end or do book signings. A lot of new authors say, I can't wait to do book signings. Now, I know for a fact that you're not a fan of book signings. Why is that?
Well, I've been on both sides. So I've been a bookstore owner, and I'm also an author who's done book signing events. At our bookstore, the most successful events were the ones where the author invited their friends and family to show up. And this is very, very common in book signing world. And I told the story in the course about how I was part of a launch for Chicken Soup for the Entrepreneur's Soul. That morning, we had local PR. We were on the morning news. We had local radio coverage. Barnes & Noble seated us like 10 steps inside the front door. And we thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be a crazy day. And at the end of the 3 hours on a Saturday, sitting in front of the door at Barnes & Noble, I think we sold 11 copies of that book. And I swore I will never do another book signing again, because I could go and give a speech to even just 50 people and I could sell 20 copies of the book, right? Or more. I'm just not a fan. When you do a book signing, you tend to end up just directing people to the bathroom. I never like that feeling of feeling like a peddler, like, please buy my book. I don't like that feeling. So I'd much rather be a speaker and earn those sales.
Dr. Ivan Meisner, who's the founder of
BNI
Business Network International, was a guest on this podcast a couple of years ago. And he tells a story about his first book, and he's written over 20 now, that he did a book signing and his mom came.
Yep.
And that was about it.
And that was about it. My mom was at mine as well. Yeah, it's really disappointing. And and I think a lot of authors find that out the hard way, because you think that's what you're supposed to do. I'm going to go do a book signing and it sounds really exciting. But most of the time it's not.
So let's talk about some of the places they can speak and either sell books, sign books. Where are some of those places?
I love trade associations. So figure out where your target audience is spending time. Many of them are probably participating in one or more trade associations. Go tour those chapters. Go speak at the national events for those associations. Get involved in those associations, for their blogs and newsletters. Pick, 1, 2, or 3. Honestly, if it's a large national association that has chapters around the country, you could keep yourself very busy. And then here we are in pandemic life. A lot of them have moved to online. So I'm doing more and more online trainings for some associations I've wanted to attend their events for years. And now I'm getting to do these national events from the comfort of my home, wearing my fuzzy slippers. So I think associations are just low-hanging fruit for anybody who wants to speak, especially when you can reach out and say, I'm an author on XYZ. Here are 3 potential topics I could cover. And here's what your audience will gain. And you will make slam dunks, and then you will sell books at the end like crazy.
Another place, and a lot of people don't think of it as speaking, is just what we're doing, podcasting.
I recommend podcast tours to authors. Absolutely. I think this is a huge opportunity. And that's another thing, Peter, I would rather do a podcast interview than a traditional radio interview any day. I've done tons of traditional radio, and I'm in California. So if I want to do morning drive time in New York, I got to be up at 4 a.m, right? Or I get up at 3 to sound like I'm awake by 4 a.m. And then you're lucky if they have you on for 5, 8, 10 minutes. Whereas on a podcast, we have an extended interview. It's promoted before and after the fact. The recording typically stays online for all eternity. And podcast hosts have devoted audiences that come back and want to listen to what they have to say. I love podcast interviews. I know you as a podcaster. I'm sure you need guests, right? I'm a podcaster. I need guests.
Exactly.
And I'm constantly looking for guests. I love getting pitches from people who are fit for my audience. So don't be afraid to go out and pitch podcasters because they need guests. And it's surprising to me how few people proactively try to get on my program.
You're right. We need guests. We need content. It's just like newspapers, magazines, they need content.
That's right. Make it easy for us.
Exactly. I'd much rather have people coming to me saying, here's what I can bring to your listeners than me going out and searching for them.
That's right.
What about things like colleges? Does that make sense if it's a good fit for the speaker?
Of course. Yeah. Colleges are a great opportunity. I think it's a little harder right now, but things are loosening up. Colleges often pay as well. They don't pay as well as the larger companies and big events, but colleges certainly pay speakers. And every department has different budget or depending on your book's subject matter. I think there's tons of opportunity in colleges. There's also places of worship, like the Unity Church. They do a ton of events with authors who are speakers, and they will promote you to their congregation and sell your book in their bookstore. So there's lots of opportunities, and in our own backyards. I mean, you could, if you have let's say you have a business book, you can keep yourself busy literally every day of the week with your chambers of commerce, with your business related trade associations, with your nonprofit organizations, with schools. I mean, it goes on and on and on. To me, if you want to be a speaker, that's easy. There are tons of options for you.
When an author's first asked to speak or speak for the first time, what's the first thing or maybe the most important thing they should do?
I think plan their content really well. Maybe study speakers. A lot of writers that I hear from, if they're new to speaking, it's really nerve-wracking, right? Public speaking is one of the greatest fears. So I would say plan out your content. I don't script my content, but I think if you're new, you should be really well prepared. Script your opening, script your closing at the very least, and create something that's going to keep you on track, whether it's slides or some sort of an outline. And then make sure you're within the time frame, because I find as an audience member, I get really frustrated when a speaker goes over, especially if you're at an event where it's back to back to back and you're looking forward to that break and the speaker's still going. That it just drives me crazy. So I think you should be really well prepared to deliver a valuable presentation within the time allotted.
The listeners can't see it, but as you're saying all of that, I'm nodding my head in agreement. I agree with that. I agree with that. Do you believe that every author who gets a speaking gig needs to get a speaking coach? Because I don't.
Oh, yeah, I don't either. I don't think coaches are the solution for everybody. I think if you're uncomfortable, groups like Toastmasters can be helpful. When I was teaching software classes, they would have us practice in an empty classroom. So I would literally go into a classroom with 30 chairs and present a course to nobody. But I'm telling you, it made me a better speaker. It helped me know my material. And I was teaching 3-day long classes. So it was really good to prepare. And I think we're all different. Some people really love coaching. I personally am more of a do-it-yourselfer. So I'd rather study and watch how other people do it and do my own practice and really refine my own skills. But if you're someone who likes hiring a coach, by all means, go for it. Nothing wrong with that.
I've worked with authors, some who are just speaking at the local Rotary or something like that once they write their book. And I'm saying, you don't need me. Here are some tips. Learn these tips and you'll be fine. But then there are people, they're going on the conference center stage in front of 800 people for an hour. And it's like, okay, we should work together.
Absolutely. Especially big gigs like that. I remember the first time I had to speak to 400 people. And it was when I was in that software job. And I had volunteered, sure, at the user conference, I'll give a presentation on this new software we're doing. And I didn't understand that I was going to walk out to a room of 400 people. So thankfully, they taught us to prepare. So I had memorized my opening and I memorized my closing. And I think many of you, if you've ever walked out on a stage and suddenly you've just hit the nerves, right? Like I left my body and I just launched into my welcome. And within the first minute, all the blood came back to my brain and I was back able to function. But had I not memorized that opening, I can't even imagine what a disaster that would have been. So absolutely, Peter, get a coach, especially if you're walking onto a big stage.
It's amazing how everything comes back once you get past that first few minutes.
First few minutes. Yep. No matter what.
Just the way the body and the mind work. Stephanie, are there any pitfalls that a new author who's been asked to speak for the first or second time maybe should look for?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, one of my pet peeves is selling from the stage. Certainly, if you're being paid to give a presentation, you should not even be talking about your book in the very slightest way, should you mention your book, because that's up to the introduction. And at the end of your session, when the event host says you can get a book at the back of the room. Even if you're not being paid, if you're speaking at the Rotary or the trade association or whatever, there is no need to oversell anything. If you do a good job and you engage that audience, they're going to want the book. They're going to want to know more about what you have to offer. They might buy your coaching services or whatever else you have to offer along with it. So there's absolutely no need to be obnoxious about mentioning your book over and over and over again.
I'm so happy you said that. I've seen people say, I'll teach you how to sell from the stage.
Ugh.
And my thought is serve the audience.
Yeah.
And they'll buy what you have to sell.
Yeah, this is why we are so in alignment, Peter, because it's all about serving the audience. And if you do a good job, they want more. That's the simple. It's that simple. It truly is.
That's actually the title of the book I'm working on. It's all about the audience.
That's a good title.
We're there to serve. Stephanie, I really enjoyed our time together. Where can our listeners connect with you? And if they're a nonfiction author, where can they learn more about the Nonfiction Authors Association?
Yeah, thank you for that. Nonfictionauthorsassociation.com is kind of our main hub. We've got our courses listed there. Our annual conference happens in May. You can find me there as well. We have a pretty solid presence on Facebook as well, too. We also have a nonfiction book club on Facebook that's totally free. So I'd love to hear from some of your listeners, Peter. I really appreciate you inviting me to talk with you today.
Been a pleasure.
My pleasure as well. Thank you.
That's a wrap of another episode of Public Speaking with Peter George. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Tune in Monday when you'll hear another episode of Public Speaking with Peter George, and again Thursday for your next episode of Quick Bites, public speaking tips and techniques you can digest in 5 minutes or less. Until next time, remember, when it comes to speaking in public, you've got this.